My family had always considered me a disappointment, and that night they humiliated me, laughed at me in the middle of the party. I am Sienna Blake, 28 years old. In their eyes, I am unemployed, a burden on the family. But what they don't know is, I am the founder of a financial technology company worth over $4 billion. When my father flipped open the cover of Fortune magazine and saw the words, Sienna Blake, the youngest billionaire in financial tech, the whole room fell silent. I kept quiet for 3 years, but that night, I let my family know. They had misjudged me. Before I tell you how my family gasped when they saw my face on the cover of Fortune, drop a comment on where you are now and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you the most. The Blakes aren't just a family, they're a legacy. Blake Financial has been a pillar of traditional wealth on the East Coast since my grandfather Henry took a modest brokerage and turned it into a regional powerhouse in the 1970s. Our family estate in Connecticut wasn't just a home. It was a shrine to reputation, control, and old money. Growing up, I learned that being a Blake meant following a path that had been set long before I was born. Elite prep schools, an Ivy League degree, and a corner office on the top floor of the Blake Tower. My parents, Richard and Lillian, had my future mapped out before I could even walk. My mother, always impeccably dressed in tailored suits, moved through boardrooms with precision while still maintaining the image of the graceful corporate wife. My father, as CEO, embodied everything the Blake name stood for: stability, status, and a deep belief that tradition was the only form of truth. They weren't cruel, just deeply invested in a vision of success I never chose. Sienna has such a sharp mind for numbers, my father would say to colleagues at company galas, his hand heavy on my shoulder. She'll be a brilliant addition to our financial analytics division, after she finishes Harvard, of course. Never mind that I had never shown the slightest interest in Harvard, or finance, or joining the company. Then there was my cousin Rachel, Gerald's daughter, 2 years older, a textbook Blake in every way. While most teenagers were going to summer camp, Rachel was analyzing market trends and networking with investment bankers. She had her own company badge at 15. Rachel closed her first major client this week. Uncle Gerald would announce at family dinners, beaming like he had won an award himself. Youngest to ever do it. Uncle Gerald sat on the board with my father. Brothers by blood, rivals and everything else. Their smiles were performative, their handshakes tight, their competition unspoken but obvious. Rachel was his pride. I was the proof that not all Blakes turned out the way they were supposed to. Such a shame Sienna doesn't have Rachel's focus, Gerald would say, just loud enough for me to hear across the table. All that potential wasted on computers and games. My grandfather Henry, the patriarch, rarely said much, but he watched. Sometimes when I tried to explain what I was building or what I was learning, I'd catch a flicker of something in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or recognition. But he never intervened. My grandmother Vivian, on the other hand, was always composed, always correct. Sienna, dear, she'd say as she gently corrected my posture. A Blake woman carries herself with dignity. This obsession with gadgets, it's not appropriate. But the loudest voice was always Aunt Sandra. She wasn't born a Blake, and she overcompensated for her outsider status by becoming a gatekeeper of everything the family stood for. To her, my interest in tech wasn't just a phase, it was an insult. Computers? She'd scoff, glass of wine in hand. Darling, that's not real work. Real wealth is built on deals, on papers, on relationships, not whatever those Silicon Valley kids are wasting their trust funds on. And then came the summer dinners. Once a year, everyone gathered at the estate. It was a performance. Every member of the family stood and announced what they had accomplished since the last gathering. Promotions, IPOs, acquisitions. And me? When I was 12, I proudly said I had taught myself how to build a simple app. How creative, Aunt Sandra replied, her smile just tight enough to sting. But maybe focus on your math grades instead. Computers come and go. Finance is forever. Stanford was 3,000 miles from my family's Connecticut estate. I used to think that still wasn't far enough. The day my acceptance letter arrived, I found my mother, Lillian, already tearing open the envelope, her eyes lighting up at the words, Stanford Graduate School of Business. She assumed I'd applied for finance, just like I'd let her believe when I filled out the scholarship advance form. I didn't correct her. The Blakes never asked why I chose Stanford over Harvard, the family's golden standard. I didn't volunteer the truth. I'd learned long ago to keep what mattered most locked tight in my heart. The send-off wasn't some tear-jerking movie scene. No warm hugs, no follow-your-dreams speeches. My father, Richard, shook my hand like I was a junior associate off to a remote branch of Blake Financial. My mother's parting words, "Don't let those tech classes distract you from the long-term goal, Sienna." That goal, of course, was a corner office at Blake Financial. I gave them a tight smile, neither agreeing nor arguing, and boarded my flight. As the plane climbed, I stared out at the misty sky and whispered to myself, from now on, I live the life I choose. Stanford was a revelation. No more judgmental stares over dinner. No one asking, have you considered a mid-level management track? No one sneering that my love for algorithms made me the odd one out. My dorm room was tiny compared to my suite at the Blake estate, but its quiet walls felt like freedom. I dove into intensive coding classes, AI workshops, and late-night data labs. I worked harder than anyone, but it didn't feel like work. For the first time, I didn't need permission to chase what I loved. I kept my switch to computer science a secret. On paper, I was still a business major to my parents. On track. But 4 weeks in, my father called. "Joined any finance clubs yet?" he asked, his voice all business. "I'm looking into it," I lied, hanging up and sinking into my chair. Then I opened my laptop and pounded out 300 lines of code for a group project on big data processing. He didn't get it. Never would. But I didn't need him to. I just needed time and space to build something that was mine. One crisp fall afternoon during my 6th week, I wandered into an open lecture by Dr. Marin Ellis titled, Why Algorithms Fail the Human Test. I wasn't enrolled, just drawn by the title. I slipped into the back row, laptop on my knees, no notebook in sight. 10 minutes in, I was hooked. Dr. Ellis didn't lecture. She spun stories, asked questions that cut deep, and sketched bold diagrams on the board. When the class hesitated on a tricky problem, I raised my hand. She turned to me, her eyes sharp but kind, and said, "Most students memorize formulas. You see the pattern hiding underneath." After class, I approached her, heart pounding, and asked 3 questions about data privacy. She answered each one slowly, thoughtfully, like I was a colleague, not a freshman. As I turned to leave, she stopped me. "Why are you in the business school if your mind thinks like a builder?" I gave a shy smile, no answer. 2 weeks later, an email arrived. "I'm mentoring a group for a data privacy project. You'd be perfect. Let me know." I replied that night. For the first time, someone saw me. Not the Blake name, not the CEO's daughter, but Sienna, the girl who could turn ideas into code that mattered. That moment lit a spark, one that would carry me through failures, fights, and a future I'd write myself. Joining Dr. Marin Ellis's project group was like stepping out of a lecture hall and into the real world, a world where I could finally breathe. Our team of 4 worked in a cramped room at the end of Stanford's engineering library, hunched over free servers and public datasets. It wasn't glamorous. No sleek offices, no fancy coffee machines. But for the first time, I wasn't the oddball. I didn't have to explain why I'd rather debug machine learning models at 3 a.m. than attend a finance club mixer. In that room, I could be Sienna. Not the Blake heiress, just a builder with big dreams. We were crafting an AI tool to detect data leaks in financial platforms. Not a cash cow, but a bold idea that lit a fire in me. I believed we could do more than just patch holes. We could rethink how finance protects people. After our first internal presentation, Dr. Ellis pulled me aside. "Sienna," she said, her voice steady but warm. "You've got real talent. Don't let it get boxed in by exams or grades." I froze, my throat tightening. A tear slipped down my cheek. Not a sob, just a quiet release. No one had ever told me I was enough, not without strings attached. Not my parents, not my family. Just her. That night, I started scribbling in a black notebook, the kind you'd find in any campus bookstore. My idea: a peer-to-peer lending platform called ClearLoop, where people could connect directly. No banks, no middlemen. It wasn't revolutionary, but I saw a way to make it better. Transparent, fair, built for folks who'd never had a shot at traditional finance, like the small business owners my family's firm ignored. I spent my entire sophomore summer on a demo, learning financial law, teaming up with law students, and designing a user interface so simple my grandparents could use it. I poured my soul into it, line by line, error by error. I didn't tell my family, but they didn't stop calling. One late night, as I wrestled with a stubborn bug, my father's number flashed on my phone. "What are you studying these days?" he asked, his tone all business. "A project," I said, vague. "In economics?" he pressed. I hesitated, then let a half-truth slip. "It's fintech." I heard his sigh through the line. "Don't let these startup fantasies pull you off a real path, Sienna. Morgan Financial's got a place for you." I didn't answer. After the call, I coded until 4 a.m., fueled by anger, sadness, and a stubborn need to prove I could live two lives, one for them, one for me. By junior year, I decided to turn ClearLoop into a real startup. I applied for a $5,000 seed grant from Stanford, enough to rent servers, buy an SSL certificate, and file an LLC. It was small, but it was mine. I started pitching to angel investors. Dr. Ellis connected me with Vincent Tran, a fintech veteran who backed early-stage startups. I sent him my demo, heart pounding. He responded positively, scheduling a call for Wednesday at 10 a.m. At 9:15 that morning, an email from my mother popped up. Subject: Opportunity from family. Attached was a polished CV she'd edited for me and an introduction to my cousin Rachel, who needed a project assistant at Morgan Financial. Her note was curt. "Think seriously, Sienna. This is stability." I closed the email, my chest tight, and walked into the call with Vincent. For 40 minutes, I poured my heart out. Every detail, every vision, every line of code. Vincent listened, then said, "Your tech's solid, but your legal framework's shaky. Get a compliance advisor if you want real funding." He was right, and I knew I could learn fast. I just needed time. 3 days later, my father called, not to check in, but to deliver news. "We've submitted your resume for Morgan's finance internship under Rachel," he said. "Don't let anyone think you can't keep up with the family." I swallowed a sigh. "I'm working on my own project," I said. "A startup?" His voice hardened. "Those games waste your time. Finance isn't for dreamers, it's for results. Discipline." I stayed calm, my words measured. "I don't need that job. I'm trying my own path." "You'll fall," he warned. "And when you do, don't expect us to wait forever." The call ended. I didn't call back for 3 months. Instead, I opened my black notebook and kept building ClearLoop, line by line, determined to write my own story. 3 months after pouring my heart into ClearLoop, my world crashed like a buggy line of code. At 1 a.m., an email from the federal financial regulator lit up my laptop screen, its words cold as a judge's gavel. "ClearLoop violates federal lending regulations. Your operations are unlicensed. Cease immediately or face legal action." I read it over and over, my heart pounding, the floor beneath me feeling like it was giving way. I'd spent hundreds of hours coding ClearLoop in my Stanford dorm, fueled by black coffee and a dream to build a peer-to-peer lending platform that was transparent, fair, a lifeline for people banks like Blake Financial ignored. I'd burned the midnight oil, argued with my team over user interfaces simple enough for my grandmother, Vivian Blake, to navigate. I'd studied financial law, hired law students to review contracts, all to create something that could change how the world saw money. But one obscure regulation I'd never heard of had obliterated it all. Desperate, I called Vincent Tran, the angel investor who'd called my demo promising. "Sienna," he said, his voice flat. "I can't back a project with no legal foundation. You need a stronger compliance team. I'm sorry." An hour later, his second email hit. He was pulling all funding. The servers went dark. My laptop screen blinked with a red error message, mocking me. ClearLoop, my first dream, the one I thought could rewrite finance, was gone in a few cruel sentences. I sat in my tiny San Francisco apartment, surrounded by cold coffee mugs and Post-it notes plastered on the walls. I didn't turn on the light. I couldn't face my reflection, couldn't bear to see the failure staring back. Was I wrong? I whispered to the dark. Am I just the delusional kid they said I was? Hoping for a shred of comfort, I called my father, Richard. He didn't answer. Instead, my Uncle Gerald called back. I spilled my heart, my voice shaking as I told him about ClearLoop's collapse. His laugh cut through the phone like a blade. "I told you, Sienna, startups aren't a game. You thought you could change the world with some code? Come home and get a real job. Rachel needs a project assistant at Blake Financial. You're lucky that door's still open." I hung up, my hands trembling so hard I dropped the phone. His words stung, but what hurt more was the email from my mother, Lillian, the next morning. Subject: a real opportunity. Inside was a polished CV she'd rewritten, listing financial skills I didn't have, and a note. "Rachel will take you on as her assistant. This is stability, Sienna. Don't miss it." I opened the CV, saw my name reshaped into their version of me. Sienna Blake, future cog in Blake Financial's machine. Not a word about the code I'd written, the nights I'd debugged until dawn, or my dream of a fairer financial world. I wanted to scream, to fire off an email saying I didn't need their rescue. But I couldn't. I slumped to the floor, staring at the ceiling, feeling my belief in myself dissolve like smoke. For 3 weeks, I barely left the apartment. The trash overflowed with ramen packets. My phone buzzed with messages from Naomi Fields, the self-taught coder from Dr. Marin Ellis's project group who'd once said, "Out here, nobody cares you're a Blake. They care what you build." I didn't reply. I was too afraid to face her disappointment, or worse, my own. Every night, my family's voices echoed in my head. Sandra's sneer. "Tech's a fad. Finance is forever." Richard's lecture. "Finance is for results, not dreams." Lillian's plea. "Marry someone stable and you'll be set." Worst of all was my own voice, whispering, "You're not good enough. You don't belong here." One afternoon, they ambushed me with a family video call, a check-in before the annual summer dinner. Sandra led the charge, her voice syrupy but sharp. "Sienna, still playing with startups?" "Rachel just closed a $15 million deal. What about you? Found a real job yet?" Richard's eyes bored through the screen. "If you don't get serious, I'm cutting your financial support. The Blakes don't bankroll dreamers." I gripped the table, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm trying." Sandra smirked. "Trying? Rachel doesn't try to succeed. Learn from her." The call ended, and I slammed my fist on the table, spilling coffee everywhere. Tears came, not from anger, but from doubt. I opened Lillian's email again, staring at her words. "This is stability." I started typing a reply. "Mom, I'm sorry. Maybe I was wrong." But I stopped, deleted every word, refusing to let them rewrite me. One sleepless night, I dug my black notebook out of my suitcase. Its pages were filled with scribbled ideas from my first days at Stanford. I nearly tore it apart, convinced it was all a pipe dream. Then I saw a line from Dr. Ellis's class. "Technology doesn't replace finance, it protects it." I froze, reading it again. That spark, buried under failure, flickered back to life. I thought of ClearLoop's mistakes, not its vision, but its gaps. I'd built for fairness, but forgot safety. At 3 a.m., in my dark apartment, I powered up my laptop. The screen's blue glow lit my face. I opened a new file and typed the first line of code for a new idea. A financial security platform using AI to detect fraud in real time, shielding users from risks I hadn't foreseen. I named it NovaShield. I didn't know where it would take me, but as my fingers danced across the keys, I felt something stir. A stubborn, fragile hope. I wasn't done yet. That night, as I typed the first line of code for NovaShield, I didn't know where it would lead. But in the quiet of my San Francisco apartment, surrounded by empty ramen packets and cold coffee mugs, I felt a spark pierce the darkness. The weeks after ClearLoop's collapse had left me a ghost, haunted by my family's voices. Gerald's sneer, Sandra's mockery, Lillian's pleas, calling me a dreamer. A failure. But a line from my black notebook, scribbled during my first Stanford class with Dr. Marin Ellis, pulled me back. Technology doesn't replace finance. It protects it. I decided to try again, not to prove my family wrong, but to prove to myself I could. NovaShield wasn't just an idea. It was a vow. A financial security platform using AI to detect fraud in real time, shielding users from the risks I'd missed with ClearLoop. I'd learned a bitter lesson. Passion alone wasn't enough. I needed knowledge, a team, and a plan to avoid the same mistakes. I went back to Dr. Marin Ellis, the mentor who'd seen something in me from day one. In her book-lined office, I poured out the story of ClearLoop's failure, my voice raw. She listened, unflinching, then leaned forward. "Failure is data, Sienna," she said. "Use it to build something bigger." She introduced me to Miles Tran, the younger brother of investor Vincent Tran, a sharp fintech lawyer who knew compliance inside out. Naomi Fields, the self-taught coder from our project group, joined too, her words echoing in my mind. "Out here, nobody cares you're a Blake. They care what you build." We set up in a tiny San Francisco office, 3 desks, a creaky server, and a whiteboard scrawled with ideas. I coded every night, sometimes until 4 a.m., tweaking AI algorithms to spot suspicious transactions. Miles pored over regulations, ensuring we'd never trip over legal hurdles again. Naomi crafted a user interface so clean and simple that anyone, from a retiree to a bank CEO, could trust it. Those early months were brutal. Doubt crept in, especially when an email from my mother, Lillian, arrived, her tone gentle but heavy. "You can still come back to Blake Financial, Sienna. Rachel's doing so well. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I didn't reply. I opened my laptop, typed another line of code, and whispered to myself, "This is my path." 6 months later, we had a NovaShield demo. We pitched it to a room of Silicon Valley investors, me in my hoodie and jeans, standing out like a sore thumb among their tailored suits. One skeptic asked, "Who are you to take on the big banks?" I met his gaze. "I'm the one who failed once and learned how to get it right." They listened. A major fund invested $2 million, then $10 million, then $50 million. NovaShield exploded, signing deals with banks from New York to Singapore. In 2 years, the company hit a $4 billion valuation. But I kept it quiet, using the alias A.M. Blake in every deal, dodging my family's radar and the press. I wanted my success to speak, not my name. That summer, an invitation arrived for the annual Blake family dinner at their Connecticut estate. I knew what awaited. Probing stares, veiled insults, pressure to ditch my startup nonsense. But I went. Not to argue, but to face them. I needed them to see the real Sienna Blake, even if just once. I drove my beat-up electric car to the mansion, still in jeans and a tee, a stark contrast to the Rolls-Royces and bespoke suits. My black notebook was tucked in my bag, a talisman of my journey. Naomi texted me before I stepped inside. "Today's your day, Sienna. Show them who you are." I smiled, took a deep breath, and pushed open the heavy oak door. Inside, the chandeliers gleamed and the air smelled of old money. Gerald greeted me with a smirk. "Still chasing dreams, Sienna?" Sandra chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension. "Rachel just closed a $20 million deal. What's your little project worth?" Lillian pulled me aside, her eyes soft but pleading. It's not too late to join us. I clutched my notebook, my resolve hardening. They didn't know NovaShield was protecting millions of transactions, that I'd built something bigger than their empire. I didn't need their approval anymore. I was ready to let my work do the talking. The Blake family dining room glittered under a chandelier's glow, with crystal wine glasses catching the light and silk tablecloths whispering wealth. My father, Richard, sat at the head of the table, his gaze as stern as if he were chairing a board meeting at Blake Financial. My mother, Lillian, flashed a polished smile, but I could see the disappointment lurking beneath it. Gerald and Sandra sat side by side, boasting about Blake Financial's latest acquisition, their voices dripping with pride. Rachel, my cousin, looked radiant in a designer gown, though her eyes flickered with unease when they met mine. My grandmother, Vivian, presided from her seat of honor, her sharp gaze slicing through the room. Only my grandfather, Henry Blake Sr., caught my eye with a quiet, knowing smile, as if he held a secret the rest of the table couldn't fathom. Dinner began with the usual parade of triumphs. Blake Financial's new hedge fund, Rachel's promotion, Gerald's crowing about the Blake legacy. Then Sandra stood, raising her glass, her voice honeyed but venomous. Here's to real careers, not chasing startup pipe dreams at 28. The table erupted in laughter, the sound cutting into me like shards of glass. I gripped my water glass, my knuckles white, fighting to stay calm. Richard leaned forward, his tone low but biting. Sienna, if you don't get a real job by year's end, I'm cutting your financial support. The Blakes don't bankroll dreamers. Gerald jumped in, his eyes glinting with smugness. Rachel just closed a $15 million deal. What about you, Sienna? Still playing with code in San Francisco? Rachel looked down, her lips tight, clearly uncomfortable with her father's jab. Vivian rose, her voice cold as steel. I've been patient long enough. If Sienna doesn't abandon these childish fantasies, I'll consider removing her from the family trust. The Blake name is a legacy, not a playground. My face burned, but I held Vivian's gaze, refusing to flinch. Lillian leaned close, whispering, There's a nice man in finance in Boston, Sienna. If you won't stabilize your career, at least marry someone solid. I just want what's best. I wanted to slam the table, to scream that I didn't need their version of stability. But I'd learned words alone wouldn't cut it. Only results would. Then the moment arrived. Mr. Harold, the family's longtime butler, entered with a silver tray stacked with the latest Fortune magazines. The new issue, sir, he said, setting them before Richard. Gerald smirked my way. Probably another overhyped tech kid burning cash and fading fast. Richard flipped open the cover, and the room fell silent as a graveyard. There I was, staring back from the page with the headline, Sienna Blake, youngest billionaire in financial tech. Lillian's wine glass slipped, red wine splashing across the pristine tablecloth like blood. Sandra's mouth hung open, speechless for once. Gerald stared at the cover, his face pale as if he'd seen a ghost. Rachel's lips curved into a small, astonished smile, her eyes sparkling with something like pride. Vivian sat frozen, her sharp gaze now wide with shock. Only Henry Sr. let out a booming laugh, clapping his hands. Magnificent. A true Blake, but on her own damn terms. I stood, my heart pounding, but my voice steady as I faced the table. NovaShield is my company, I said. It's worth more than your entire boardroom combined. I didn't build it to prove you wrong. I built it because it's my future. And the future of finance. I turned to Sandra and Gerald, then to Lillian. Mom, I don't need a solid man to stabilize me. I've done that myself. I walked out, leaving the room in stunned silence. As I passed Rachel, she grabbed my hand, whispering, I'm sorry, Sienna. I had no idea. I gave her a small smile, no apology needed. I'd said my piece. Back in San Francisco, I stood in NovaShield's office, the city lights twinkling below. My team, Naomi, Miles, and the others worked tirelessly, turning my dream into reality every day. I opened my black notebook to its final page where I'd written, "Failure doesn't define you. How you rise does." I'd once believed my family's doubts, thought I wasn't enough. But I'd learned failure was just data, and that data led me here. A 28-year-old billionaire, not because I was a Blake, but because I dared to be me. After that fateful night at the Blake estate, when my face on the Fortune cover silenced the room, I drove back to San Francisco under a starlit sky, a strange calm washing over me. It wasn't the thrill of shocking my family, Gerald's pale face, Sandra's speechless gape, or Lillian's spilled wine. It was peace, the kind that comes when you know you belong. Not to the glittering Connecticut mansion, but to NovaShield's modest office, where my code safeguarded millions of financial transactions every day. NovaShield wasn't just a company. It was a promise that technology could make finance transparent, secure, and fair. After the Fortune cover dropped, the company exploded. Banks from New York to Singapore lined up to sign contracts. We outgrew our cramped San Francisco office, opening sleek hubs in London and Tokyo. Naomi Fields, the self-taught coder who'd told me, "Good code doesn't care who you are," became our CTO, her fierce grin lighting up every team meeting. Miles Tran, the legal whiz who'd saved us from ClearLoop's mistakes, led our compliance team, crafting contracts as airtight as perfect code. In 2 years, NovaShield protected over 1 billion transactions annually, hitting a $6 billion valuation. But I didn't let the numbers define me. I still wore hoodies, drove my beat-up electric car, and ate lunch with my team in our no-frills cafeteria. Every night, I opened my black notebook, now thicker with ideas, and wrote, "Legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you leave behind." I launched the Henry Blake Senior Scholarship for young tech dreamers without pedigrees, named for my grandfather, the only Blake who'd looked at me with unwavering belief at that dinner. I reached out to Dr. Marin Ellis, my Stanford mentor who'd seen the pattern underneath in me. Over coffee, she agreed to advise the scholarship. "You're not just building a company, Sienna," she said, her eyes warm. "You're building a future." Her words stayed with me, a reminder of why I kept going. Success didn't mean smooth sailing. A major financial conglomerate, rumored to be tied to Blake Financial, approached with a $10 billion offer to buy NovaShield. "You'll never worry again." Their CEO purred, his voice slick as a pre-drafted contract. I thought of the sleepless nights, ClearLoop's collapse, my family's taunts of delusional. I looked him in the eye. "NovaShield isn't for sale. It's for protecting people." He smirked like I'd turned down a golden ticket. But I knew value wasn't in dollars. It was in impact. The media didn't let up either. Some dug up ClearLoop's failure, branding me a lucky fluke or overhyped star. One headline stung. "Sienna Blake, from flop to billionaire or just a mirage." My blood boiled, but I smiled. Their jabs were no different from Sandra and Gerald's dinner table barbs. I answered in my own way. At a TED Talk in San Francisco, I stood under blazing lights and shared, "Failure is data. I crashed with ClearLoop, but I used that data to build NovaShield, protecting millions from financial fraud. Don't fear falling. Fear staying down." The crowd roared, and I saw Naomi in the front row, nodding with pride. The Blake family wasn't the same after that night. Lillian sent a handwritten letter, her script shaky. "Sienna, I'm sorry. I didn't know how far you'd gone. I'm proud of you." I read it, feeling a flicker of warmth but a lingering distance. I replied simply, "Thanks, Mom." "I'm okay." I didn't promise a Connecticut reunion. I'd learned family doesn't define you. You define yourself. Rachel showed up at NovaShield's office one afternoon, trading her designer suit for a nervous smile. "I'm sorry, Sienna," she said, her voice genuine. "I had no idea what you'd built. Maybe we could work together?" I smiled, nodding. "I'll think about it, Rachel. But NovaShield's my path, not Blake Financial's." She nodded, understanding me for the first time. Henry Sr. called from Connecticut, his voice booming yet warm. You're my real legacy, Sienna. Not contracts or mansions, but the guts to break the mold. Tears fell. The first in years. He was the only Blake who never doubted me. Sandra and Gerald, though, didn't budge. Word spread in financial circles that they called NovaShield a lucky break, destined to crash like ClearLoop. I didn't respond. Every new contract, every protected transaction was my answer. I sent Vivian, who'd threatened to cut me from the trust, a signed fortune cover with a note. Legacy isn't inheritance, Grandma. It's what we create. She didn't reply, but I didn't need her to. I'd done it for me. NovaShield's success birthed ClearPath, a free platform using our tech to protect small businesses and underserved communities from financial fraud. I named it to honor ClearLoop, not as a failure, but as the lesson that led me here. Seeing a woman in a small town use ClearPath to save her shop, I knew this was my true legacy. I returned to Stanford, co-hosting a workshop with Dr. Ellis. Facing eager students, I said, I was called a dreamer, a kid playing with computers. But dreams, backed by data and grit, become reality. Don't let anyone write your story. Later, at a global tech conference, I stood under bright lights, my black notebook in hand, its pages heavy with failures, comebacks, and victories. I once thought I wasn't enough. I told thousands. But every fall taught me to rise stronger. Failure doesn't define you. Your legacy is how you rebuild. As the lights dimmed, I saw faces in the crowd. Young and old, dreamers like me who'd been told they didn't belong. My story wasn't just about NovaShield or fortune. It was about daring to believe even when the world says you're wrong. A year after my face graced the cover of Fortune, I thought I'd seen the worst storms. NovaShield, the company I'd poured my heart into after the wreckage of ClearLoop, was soaring, protecting 1.5 billion financial transactions a year, valued at $8 billion. Our San Francisco office buzzed with energy. Naomi Fields, my brilliant self-taught coder, now CTO, barking orders to her team. Miles Tran, the legal eagle who'd saved us from repeating past mistakes, poring over contracts. I'd walk through the office in my worn jeans and hoodie, coffee in hand, feeling like I'd finally found my place. But success, I'd learned, doesn't come without shadows. One gray morning, as fog clung to the bay, Naomi burst into my office, her face pale. Sienna, we've been hit. My stomach dropped. Her laptop screen glowed with a crimson alert. NovaShield data breach. Millions exposed. It was a lie. A meticulously crafted cyber attack, spreading like wildfire across tech blogs and news outlets. Headlines screamed, Sienna Blake? Billionaire or bust? Again? My phone buzzed with notifications, each one a dagger. I'd faced failure before, but this felt personal, like someone wanted to bury me. We huddled in the war room, me, Naomi, Miles, and a dozen engineers, the hum of laptops drowning out the city noise. Miles leaned forward, his voice steady. This isn't a real breach. It's a smear campaign, Sienna. Someone's using AI to fake the data. Naomi's fingers flew across her keyboard, tracing the attack's origin. I'll find them, she vowed, her eyes fierce. I nodded, my heart pounding but resolute. We survived ClearLoop's collapse. We'll survive this. As Naomi's team dug into the code, an email landed in my inbox from Titan Financial, a conglomerate with whispers of ties to Blake Financial. The subject, a way out. They offered $12 billion to buy NovaShield. The message was slick, almost fatherly. You can't fight the world, Sienna. Let us take the burden. I stared at the screen, memories of that family dinner flooding back. Sandra's mocking laugh, Vivian's cold threat to cut me from the inheritance, Lillian's plea for me to settle down. I hit delete. NovaShield wasn't just a company. It was my fight. My proof that I could rewrite the rules of finance. Amid the chaos, a handwritten letter arrived from Rachel, my cousin. She was getting married in Connecticut at the Blake estate and wanted me there. Your family, Sienna, she wrote. Please come. I hesitated. The last time I'd stepped into that mansion, I'd left them speechless with the fortune cover. But something in Rachel's words tugged at me, a chance to see if anything had changed. I drove my beat-up electric car to the Blake estate, still in jeans, my black notebook tucked in my bag like a talisman. The mansion sparkled under chandeliers, guests in tuxedos and gowns sipping champagne. Rachel greeted me with a hug, her eyes warm. "I'm so proud of you, Sienna," she whispered. For a moment, I believed her. Then Sandra glided over, her smile sharp as glass. "Trouble in paradise, Sienna? I heard your little company's crumbling again. Maybe it's time to join Rachel at Blake Financial. Something stable." Gerald, her father, chuckled, raising his glass. "Billionaires don't last long when they can't keep data safe, do they?" I gripped my notebook, my knuckles white. Lillian, my mother, approached, her voice soft but heavy. "Sienna, if it's too much, Blake Financial can help. You don't have to do this alone." I forced a smile. "Thanks, Mom, but I've got this." Then Henry Blake Sr., my grandfather, shuffled over, his eyes twinkling. "Don't listen to them, kiddo," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "You're rewriting the family legacy and they can't stand it." His words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge. At the reception, as violins played and guests danced, my phone buzzed. Naomi's message, "We've got them." The attack came from a rival tied to Titan Financial. My blood boiled. This wasn't just business. It was personal. I slipped out, leaving the glittering party behind, ready to fight back. Back in San Francisco, I called a press conference. Standing before a sea of reporters, I held up a tablet showing Naomi's evidence. "NovaShield was targeted with a fabricated data breach," I said, my voice steady. "We've traced the culprits and we're stronger for it. This isn't just about protecting transactions, it's about protecting trust." I paused, staring into the cameras. Failure is just data, and I've learned to use it to build something unbreakable. The room erupted in applause, Naomi and Miles beaming from the sidelines. The crisis passed, but it lit a fire in me. I doubled down on ClearPath, the free platform I'd launched to help small businesses and underserved communities secure their finances. I flew to a rural town in Mexico, where ClearPath was transforming lives. In a dusty marketplace, I met Elena, a woman running a small bakery. She showed me how ClearPath had stopped a scam that nearly bankrupted her. "You gave me hope," she said, her eyes shining. I hugged her, tears streaming down my face. This was why I fought. Not for headlines, but for people like Elena, the ones my family's world of boardrooms and champagne would never see. I returned to Stanford, co-hosting a workshop with Dr. Marin Ellis, my mentor, who'd once told me failure was data. Standing before a room of wide-eyed students, I opened my black notebook, now worn and heavy with notes. "I was called a dreamer, a failure," I said. They told me I didn't belong. But dreams, backed by grit and code, become reality. Don't let anyone write your story for you. A student, a recipient of the Henry Blake Sr. Scholarship, stood up. "How do you keep going when everyone doubts you?" she asked. I smiled. "Find the people who believe in you, your team, your mentors, your heart, and keep coding your future." That night, I stood on a global tech conference stage, lights blazing, thousands watching. I held my notebook, flipping to its final page where I'd written, "Shadows only make the light brighter." I looked out at the crowd. "I thought failure was the end," I said. "But it was the beginning. Every time you fall, you get to build something greater. Don't let doubt, yours or theirs, define you. Define yourself." As the lights dimmed, I saw faces in the crowd. Young dreamers, older skeptics, people like me who'd been told their dreams were impossible. My story wasn't just about NovaShield or fortune. It was about rising from the ashes, proving the naysayers wrong, and lighting the way for others. As I stood on that global tech conference stage, the spotlight hot on my face, I held my black notebook, the one that carried me through the ruins of ClearLoop, the triumph of NovaShield, and every barb thrown by my family at that fateful dinner. The crowd before me was a sea of faces, young dreamers, seasoned skeptics, folks like you who've been told their dreams don't matter. I flipped to the last page where I'd scrawled, "Shadows only make the light brighter." "My name is Sienna Blake," I said, my voice steady. I was called Jobless, a dreamer, a failure. But I learned something. Failure isn't the end. It's the raw data of your comeback. Every time I fell, when ClearLoop crashed, when my family laughed, when the world tried to break NovaShield, I used that data to build something stronger. I built a company worth billions, a platform like ClearPath that lifts up small businesses, and a legacy that's mine, not my family's. I looked out at the audience, thinking of Elena in Mexico, the students at Stanford, my grandfather Henry Sr.'s proud smile. "You don't need a famous last name or a perfect record," I continued. "You need grit, a spark of belief, and the courage to write your own code for the future. So, to anyone who's been doubted, dismissed, or told to settle, your story isn't over. Make them eat their words." As the crowd roared, I felt a quiet peace. I wasn't just Sienna Blake, the youngest billionaire in fintech. I was Sienna, the girl who dared to dream beyond the dinner table. Hey, Hidden Family Revenge Stories fans, have you ever been underestimated only to prove them wrong? Drop your story in the comments. We're reading everyone. If Sienna's journey fired you up, hit that like button, subscribe to Hidden Family Revenge Stories, and ring the bell for more tales of triumph over doubt. Let's keep rewriting the future together.